So several people came up to me earlier and they said really excited to hear about my talk. And I'm wondering maybe because Silicon Valley, you guys don't keep in touch with what's going on in China, right? Okay, so let's see if this works. I don't think this works. Let's quick survey. How many of you actually own Bitcoin? So here we go. Okay, this is great. This is great. Hands down. How many of you don't own Bitcoin? Okay, so and then anyone who own more than one and less than 0.003 Bitcoins. Anyone in that? Okay, that's good. So you know what's 0.003? What's the significance of that? That's the average number of Bitcoins per capita for the whole world. So if you have more than 0.003, then you're set. You have more than your share of Bitcoin. And then if you have less than 0.003, then you should buy 0.003. And it costs you only like $1 US, right? So quite cheap. Okay, so my next question is, so thank you Danny, thank you Perkins Coie for hosting this event. Very happy to be back in Silicon Valley to talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin in China. How many of you got to see or attend the what was it, lecture series I gave at Stanford on December 5th? Just a handful. Okay, good. So there's been a lot of changes in the last 3.5 months, and I'll share with you what I know about the situation in China. So I'm based in China, in Shanghai. So we have about 45 minutes. Is that right? Okay, and then I'll try to end early so we can take some questions. I think those would be more interesting. Okay, so the quick agenda is we'll talk about the company, my company BTC China, our users, talk about the adoption in China, what's happened last year, what's happened early this year, the regulation that happened on December 5th and the aftermath of that, common misunderstandings, and also give you a take on my perspective on the future of Bitcoin in China. Okay? For those of you who are new to BTC China, we're China's very first exchange that launched about 2.5, close to 3 years ago. So now that Mt. Gox is down, we might be one of the world's, how do you say it? We might be the oldest running exchange now. But given Mt. Gox went down, I don't think this is something to brag about. Okay, anyways, I joined as co-founder and CEO last year in around April timeframe. And then by September, we eliminated trading commission, and that really spurred the market in China. So by November time, our trading volume really went up, and at one point became the world's largest in trading volume. And that's also when we announced our VC funding from Lightspeed. Okay, and then sure enough, in December, the Chinese government got wind of what we're doing, and they wanted to partake in this. So on December 5th, they announced some regulation. I'll talk about that in more detail. And then in January, we did a bunch of things in changing in fees, voucher systems, bank withdrawals, deposits, maybe take a commission model, and also a bunch of stuff I'll cover. So that's a lot of changes in China. So by the way, before I go on, for those of you who have been keeping in touch with what's going on with Bitcoin in China, where do you get your news source? Where you read the Chinese Sina.com? What do you read? CNN? What do you guys read? Any ideas? Reddit?
CoinDesk.
What else?
CoinDesk.
CoinDesk, Reddit. What did you say? Bitcoin Magazine. Okay, that's right. There's a bit about us earlier. That's good. Okay. Anyway, so this doesn't surprise you. These are the prices in China last year. I think these are in RMB. Yeah, that's right. So correlation, causation, I don't know, but when we eliminated trading commissions, the volume picked up rapidly, and also the prices picked up. So by November, early December, prices reached about 7,000 RMB, which is over $1,000 US. Trading volume just went crazy. Okay. So from a year-to-year perspective, when I got involved last spring, early spring, until December, trading volume really rose. The total transaction volume rose by a factor of 1,000. By a factor of 100. 10 times in price, 10 times in volume. At one point, we had over over $80 million in daily transaction volume. So that was really, really a lot of money changing hands. Okay, so this is This is 2 things we did in late December, in early January. I can talk a little bit about that. But we actually went back to a free commission model as of just a few days ago. So this is negative commission model and BTC vouchers. But I'll talk about this maybe in the Q&A part. But let's talk about our users. So those of you who are curious about why China is so interesting in terms of the Bitcoin market, let's take a look at the survey. So what's interesting here is the demographics in this audience also match what we see in China. We did a survey in November, December, and what we see is vast majority of our users are male, 92%. So it looks like that's what we have here, 92%. And the vast majority of our users are in the young category, under age of 40. Is that right? Almost here. So it appears to be, this is common. I've seen this in Europe. I've seen this in the Silicon Valley. I've seen this in China. So this is pretty common for the Bitcoin ecosystem. Education level, if I were to guess, amongst the users, over 90% have bachelor's degree, master's degrees, or PhD level and above. So this is really a group of very well-educated people. Okay. So anyone without a bachelor's degree here? That's 8% of you. Okay. Okay. So and then we'll talk about why you buy Bitcoin. Now this is where it gets interesting because I think this is different in the U.S. than in China. What we see here is the vast majority of people are buying Bitcoin for 2 reasons: short-term speculation and long-term investment. So these two show up as 2 different bars here in the survey result, but to me it's really 2 sides of the same coin. And the reason I say that is speculation and investment are essentially the same thing. The difference is in time horizon, and the difference is whether you believe in it or not. So the example I use is, if I buy real estate in some location, if you agree with me, if you think this is a good place to buy real estate, you're like, oh, Bobby, good investment choice. But if you think this is a bad place to buy real estate, then you'll be like, oh, Bobby, are you speculating now? So it's kind of like buying stock, same thing, right? If you buy the right stock, they're like, oh, good investment in Berkshire Hathaway stock. But if you buy like Twitter stock, oh, speculation, because this is a crazy internet company. So it turns out in China, same thing. So the people who believe in Bitcoin, who have a longer term horizon, they would check the box for long-term investment. And the ones who are in it, kind of like day trader, kind of like buy and sell day, tomorrow, or next week, then they're the ones who are speculating. So what we don't see, or very, very little, is the purchasing goods. So unfortunately in China, we never had the Silk Road website. So that's why very few people were buying goods. And I'm sure all of you who have Bitcoin were using Silk Road, right? So no one wants to admit to that. I guess I shouldn't ask. Is there another site that people are using now to buy stuff?
Overstock.
Overstock?
Yeah.
That's the reason. That's why you have Bitcoins. Okay, so now going back to the investment versus long-term, short-term speculation. So what we see is it actually matters in a little bit correlation with age group and correlation with years of experience in investing. So the ones who are more savvy, more wise, have more years of investment experience, they're the ones who see Bitcoin as a long-term thing, and they're the ones who check the box investment. And the younger folks, maybe the recent college grads, are the ones who are really, learning this for new. They're the ones who are speculating, and they think this is more short-term. Okay. So the more experienced a user, the more likely they'll buy Bitcoin for long-term investments. So let's take a survey here quickly. This can help educate me as well. So those of you who raise your hand who own Bitcoin, how many of you are owning it because of long-term investment? I myself included. Okay, now hands down, thank you, that's a lot of people. And how many of you are really buying Bitcoin for short-term speculation? All right, very bold. Awesome, thanks for the honesty, that's great. So have you sold? You taking the ride down? So after my talk, the price will go down more, right? Yeah. So now let's talk about why is Bitcoin so popular in China. So I think I should change the slide now because this was the case in December, but in March this is not necessarily the case anymore. But I'll tell you what I think. So the theories about fast adoption. I've presented this slide before. So sorry if you've seen my presentation before, but essentially 4 things. It's a nation of savers. So Chinese people like to save, in contrast to North Americans who spend all their paycheck, right? So the good thing in North America is you get paid twice a month, right? Most of you, but in China you get paid once a month. But even then, they try to save it. So it's a nation of savers, nation of engineers, a lot of engineers in China, but it turns out probably a lot of engineers here as well, right? So that's why Silicon Valley is so unique. And people are eager to participate in something new, so I think this applies to Silicon Valley, but not necessarily for Greater America. And lastly, it's a nation of innovators. A lot of innovators, a lot of businesses in the electronics and computer industry. So the savings rate, we naturally know that in China it's really high. It's 35 to 50%. People save in terms of so this amount of savings as a percentage of GDP. Okay. So there are various causes for that. Part of it is because China has an underdeveloped investment infrastructure, so not a lot of good alternate choices for investments. In the US, you can buy stocks, you can invest in real estate, everything's very accessible to people who do have money. But in China, it turns out the financial sector is underdeveloped and people are really looking for better ways to invest. And plus, because of the capital controls, it's very hard for them to invest in investments abroad, if you will. Okay, so as a virtual commodity, Bitcoin presents a real new opportunity to invest and save money. And the way I see it is, Bitcoin, as you all know, it's very scarce. It's scarce, limited, and also decentralized. So I think it's the ultimate form of preserving purchasing power. So this phrase is not used very often, but essentially the reason why we think Bitcoin price will go up is because if the value of money goes down and you want to preserve your purchasing power, that's why you would transfer some of your savings into Bitcoin. Okay, so I do that. Do you guys do that? Anyone? Anyone take their pay cut? So not pay cuts. Anyone take their paychecks to Bitcoin? Yeah. Oh, good. A few people. So, second thing is a nation of engineers. So there's a good emphasis on math and science. I think in the U.S., I came out here for high school and college. There's always taboo, for people who, there's the jocks and then there's the geeks and nerds who study math and science. So in China, it turns out the political leaders and business leaders are very likely to have come through an engineering background in comparison to their Western counterparts. So whereas in the U.S., I know the lawyers here, but in the U.S., a lot of our politicians are lawyers, right? Is that right? How many lawyers in the room? How many of you going to go run for Congress and run for the Senate? So if you look at the next slide, what we have is a nation of engineers. So the last three presidents, including the current one, they all had engineering degrees. Electrical engineering, hydraulic engineering, chemical engineering. Whereas in the U.S., a bunch of lawyers in Washington, D.C. For good or bad, in this case, this law firm really understands Bitcoin. So this is quite rare, actually. So why are they interested in participating in something new? The reason is this is cultural. So in China, the internet has actually evolved very fast, very quickly. So a lot of new services, a lot of new things are coming on the internet, and the people who are paying attention, they really want to try out and try new things. So there's a, how do you say it? There's people are easygoing. They're willing to try new things, including putting their money and investing in new things. Whereas in the U.S., I think it took a little bit longer for Bitcoin to catch on. So certainly, Bitcoin has become more popular in the media in the last year. But in China, at one point, it was just all over social media. Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin prices. Has that happened in the U.S. this last year? Like Bitcoin craze on Twitter, Facebook, has it happened? Yes, no? Yeah. A little bit? Okay. So if it hasn't happened yet, that's actually good news because it might happen this year and then the price will go up again. And then lastly, I talk about the innovators. Basically, it's ground zero for Bitcoin mining. So certainly in late 2012 and early 2013, China was ground zero for Bitcoin mining. These days, I don't know. I haven't kept track of the latest ASICs chips where they're being shipped to, but mining is still very popular. A lot of professionals, data centers for mining, and of course all the ASIC stuff is happening in China and Asia in general. Okay. Any of you guys do ASIC mining here? Wow, good. Awesome. Any of you use company machines to do ASIC? Okay. So in terms of trading volume, what we saw last year was a big shift. So in April, when I first got involved, so the majority of Bitcoin trading was done in US dollars. And by November, we had a really healthy volume. A lot of trading volume was done in renminbi, the Chinese currency. Now that said, I can tell you, the caveat is that some of this, or a lot of it, was day trading speculation. So I don't know if that was good or bad. Okay, let's get to the interesting stuff. The Chinese regulatory environment. So is that what you guys want to hear about?
Yes.
All right. But I don't work for the government. Okay, so I'm a dual citizen, American, Hong Kong, so Chinese American. So I say that because so I don't get in trouble. So I'll give you my take on what's going on. Okay? So I don't speak for the communist government, just so you know. So the PBOC is the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank, sort of like the Federal Reserve here, and they issued written guidance for the first time on December 5th, 2013. And I wrote that as step number 1 because essentially it's the first of several steps that they have taken and they will continue to take. Okay, so Yi Gong there is a vice minister of central bank. He's the one who's really qualified to regulate Bitcoin. He's head of the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, which governs all the foreign currency exchanges and all that. So 4 things. Actually, let me talk about number 2 first. So the good news is Bitcoin has been defined as sort of like personal property, as a legitimate digital asset, as a digital virtual commodity. And what that means is people have the basic right, this is number 3, have the basic right to own it, to buy it, to sell it, to trade it. So yay! So Bitcoin has legal standing in China. So that's my interpretation. My lawyers tell me differently. But I think, if they call it out, and it's, I'll give you an example of what does not have legal standing. Marijuana, cocaine, opium, illegal drugs, guns and ammunitions don't have legal, it is what it is, but they're not allowed. People are not allowed to own them, to buy and sell and trade them, okay? So whereas Bitcoin, it's not in the same bucket, so Bitcoin is legitimate. So that's good news, that's number 2 and 3, okay? However, they also said Bitcoin is not a currency. So you guys know the difference between money and currency? This is one of the other talks I give. So money is what we colloquially use, things that's in my wallet, right? That's I have money in my wallet, okay? In this case, I have these really new.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you guys have this? It's only paper. Doesn't mean much. Easy to counterfeit, right? Okay, so the point is money is colloquially is what we have in a wallet, but currency has a legal definition. So each country defines what is a currency, what's not a currency, and so on and so forth. So it turns out China, the government, has every right to define what is a currency and what's not a currency. And in this case, they call it out, they say, oh, sorry, Bitcoin is not a currency in China, and that's it. So it turns out, for those of us in the industry, it's actually not so surprising, because it turns out no other country has ever called Bitcoin a currency. Am I right? So however, the media are like, oh my gosh, China banned Bitcoin. So the media sometimes gets this wrong. So because it's not a currency, there's some implications with that. Essentially, you know who deals with currencies, right? Banks and financial institutions and payment processor companies. So these types of companies, entities, because Bitcoin is not a currency, so banks, financial institutions, they're not allowed to use Bitcoin as if it were a currency. So therefore, they can't take deposits, they can't make loans, they can't charge fees in Bitcoin, they can't create products and services in Bitcoin. So this is what was called out in the written memo on December 5th. So to me, it's logical, right? Because Bitcoin is not a currency, then banks can't use it. But somehow, for the China central bank to spell this out on paper, it actually scared a lot of people, and it created a whole media frenzy about whether Bitcoin is legal or not legal in China. So today in the U.S., if anyone can correct me, is Bitcoin defined as a currency in the U.S., defined as money? Yes, no? Really? California? Defined as money?
Yeah.
already? Okay, good. That's
Well,
I guess.
well, the legislation hasn't passed yet, but
Oh, it's on. Okay,
table
on the
right
table.
now in
Okay.
California.
Okay. So if it does get defined as money as currency, that actually brings that's actually a good thing. That's probably the first state or first country to do that.
They call it legal money.
Legal money. So that would be awesome. Then you guys are lucky, the ones in California. That's awesome. But still hasn't passed yet, right? But anyways, so I look forward to the day when Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank can actually allow me as a citizen or as a resident to deposit my Bitcoins with the bank. That would be really awesome. Probably I don't know how many years out. But if it does ever get classified as currency, then that would happen. But for China, that's not likely because they said it's not a currency. So they might change their mind, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that. So the key points of the written guidance is because it's not a currency, it will not be regulated as a currency. This way, it keeps the banks and financial institutions keeps them on a separate track. And this way, if Bitcoin ever fails, or if ever there's some ever major drastic or some bad catastrophe, then it won't pull down the banking sector. So that's the reason why they want to make it separate. Okay. The second thing is individuals, however, are still allowed to participate in Bitcoin in owning and buying and selling. And the reason is because Bitcoin is declared as a legal thing and not an illegal good. Okay. What else? Virtual commodity, and in our case, the other good news is that Bitcoin exchanges like BTC China, we just have to register with appropriate authorities, and we're legitimate business. So yay, congrats. Okay, so some implications. So the financial institutions, they cannot use Bitcoin. So no insurance products in China, no deposit products, no loans in Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. So here's the tricky part. You know the bottom right corner, goods and services cannot be paid for in Bitcoin. So there's actually two interpretations of that. The broader interpretation is that all goods and services all over China cannot be paid for and cannot be priced and paid for in Bitcoin. So that's the more strict interpretation. The more narrow interpretation is this only applies to banks and financial institutions. So the reason there's these two interpretations is because the issuing body is a central bank. So all they do is they govern banks and foreign currency exchanges, right? So they don't govern like the coffee shops or restaurants, which is handled by Ministry of Commerce. So that's why this is yet to be seen whether Bitcoin payment will be allowed and will take off in China. So we'll have to see about that, because if you think about it, because Bitcoin is not a currency, it's just something, right? So if I go to a coffee shop and I have a bar of soap, and I'm like, can I get a coffee and can I give you my soap? And if they say yes, it's barter, right? And then now I have some Bitcoins or 0.01 Bitcoin instead of a bar of soap, and I say, can I get a cup of coffee for this? And if they take it, then it's just barter, right? So can you stop that? I don't know, but one thing I know is if there's one country or one government that can stop it, it's probably China. So we'll see. So the immediate impact is that, this is dated. Okay, here we go. So here's what happened. So step one is on December 5th. So as you see, the prices went up, and then after December 5th, the price came down and bounced right back up. So I'm talking about. Excuse me. People ask me what happened on the 5th versus the 16th. So the prices went up. This is in RMB prices, and it peaked out, and then on December 5th, it like crashed for like a day or two, and then bounced back up again. And that's when So by the way, I don't work for the government, but I talk to people who work for the government, and we found out through some channel. Are you guys recording this? We guessed. We guessed. The reason was that statement didn't do its job. So they're like, what the heck? How come we didn't squash the price? See, they don't understand that Bitcoin is truly decentralized. I mean, what's the ultimate proof that Bitcoin is decentralized? Is when Mt. Gox crashed and went bust, Bitcoin price didn't go to zero, right? So on the one hand, I know many of you may have lost money on Mt. Gox, But if Mt. Gox was the one who issued Bitcoin, who created and issued Bitcoin, there would be no Bitcoin to speak of today, right? It'd be priced at zero today. So anyway, so they tried to suppress the price and didn't quite work. So they did step 2. So on December 16th, this is the fun part. So how many of you know the story about December 16th? How many of you lost money on December 18th? No one? Maybe I should just skip this section. Should I skip it?
No.
Maybe you guys don't know about this, right?
That's right. Tell us.
Oh, that's right. That's why I should not skip it. Okay. Just making sure you're awake. Okay. So I'm guessing this. We think this is what happened. Okay, we pieced it together. So top payment processors, all the companies like Alipay, Tenpay, and there's about a dozen of them, the top ones, got called into a secret hush-hush meeting in Beijing to meet with their regulators. So their regulators is the central bank, the PBOC. And when you get called to Beijing for this kind of meeting, you know what's going on. You know something's going to happen. So essentially, at the meeting, the regulators warned these 12 companies about the dangers of Bitcoin. Again, this is a planned thing, right? They purposely called the meeting to warn them about it, and they reprimanded the company, the payment processors, for working with Bitcoin companies. So it turns out several of them had working relationships with Bitcoin exchanges like ours, like BTC China, and essentially these payment processors were being scolded for working with Bitcoin exchanges because Bitcoin's dangerous. It's like volatile, you know. So they got reprimanded, and essentially they were given a verbal ultimatum. It's too low, right? They were given a verbal ultimatum to stop doing business. Can we fix this? Oh. All right. Not a technician. Okay, so they were given a verbal ultimatum to stop doing business with Bitcoin exchanges. Essentially, they were required to break off the relationship with Bitcoin exchanges. So that's what happened. So by December 18th, this news came out, and BTC China, along with several other exchanges, we had to cut off our deposit methods because we used exclusively these payment processors to sort of pull money in. Yeah. So I guess none of you lost money, so this audience is okay. No one's gonna hate me for this. The bad side is that there was nothing was written. Okay. Thank you, Dave. Nothing was written, so it was all right. That's good. That's fine. Yes. No. Okay. So nothing was written. So this is where it was confusing because it was a verbal warning that was not written. I'll tell you about how the Chinese do it. So by the December 18th, all Bitcoin exchanges were cut off and dumped by payment processors, shutting off deposits, and that's when Bitcoin prices truly crashed. And then the rest is history. Okay. So after that, Bitcoin exchanges we switched to using direct bank deposits and even taking in cash, and there's a whole bunch of things. Okay, so let me give you a politics 101 about China. Any of you study in China? So I met a few people who actually went to school in China, so that's pretty impressive. Yes? Even some Caucasians who went to school in China, right? Is that right? Yes, a few? That's really awesome. Yeah. So good. So this is how things work in China. So raise your hand, speak up if you think this is wrong or different. So how are laws written in China? So without judging good or bad, let me just tell you how things are different in China. So Eastern versus Western culture. Okay. So a lot of times these rulings or writings are purposely filled with ambiguities. This is not bad, okay, for those of you who are reporting this. This is a good thing. Okay? Because it leaves room for adjustments. I'm sorry? No, but you have to think differently, okay? I urge you to think differently. I'll tell you why this is a good thing. Because it purposely leaves room for me to make adjustments down the road. So if I were like the guy in charge, right? You know, one of those three guys up there earlier, it leaves room for us to, change things. And secondly, it turns out that I could make clarifications by issuing verbal explanation, verbal interpretation is actually goes beyond what is written. But by the way, this won't fly here in the U.S. I think. So and the third is basically the notion of enforcement or selective enforcement, lack of enforcement. So sometimes the lack of enforcement is by chance. So if you're jaywalking down the street, no one catches you, that's by chance. Sometimes the lack of enforcement is on purpose because they don't bother with that, enforcing that aspect. So it's the notion of the one eye open, one eye shut. Have you guys heard of that expression? It's a very popular Chinese saying. So it's like one eye I see, the other eye I purposely don't see. Okay, so regulation Chinese style, here's my Venn diagram. So there's a written regulation, there's the verbal interpretation, and then there's a level of enforcement. So everything can fall between, and then everything that's sort of not in the smack, so whatever is smack in that center, where all three is covered, that's like solid, in black. Like what's legal, what's not legal. And everything that's outside is called the gray area. So in China, the three circles are really that far apart. In the US, I think it's closer together. Yeah, question? Comment?
When she still pays the system.
One sheet, that's like another two-hour lecture. Maybe it's a 2-week course. One sheet, I'll come back to that. Basically, one sheet is about relationships and all that. There's no easy answer. Huh? No. It's Guanxi's not related to this. Guanxi is just how you get business done. It's like lobbying in Washington D.C. It's kind of like that.
More cultural, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's more about how people operate. Yeah. Good point though. So here's this is the fun part. Okay, so this is my interpretation. Don't take this too seriously. So here's how it's written. Okay. So since you don't read Chinese, much of this is how it's that basically because of P, that A, B, and C are not allowed either directly or indirectly. So why do you think they put the or indirectly? Any ideas? But it's basically like if they just had said if A, B, and C are not allowed, that's too open and shut. So they want to say directly not allowed, and indirectly also not allowed. So and then they would give examples. They'll be like, this includes things like X, Y, and Z, or anything else that's similar. Okay, so this is what basically they'll get you if they want to get you. Okay, so and then that was the written part. Okay, so that's how they do the written part. Lots of leeway, just it's like what they want. And then the verbal, here's what they'll say. So this example, they call you to a meeting. They'll say, oh, so you better not do D, E, and F, okay, or else ... So what aspects will be enforced? Okay, anyway, so we talked about the directive, we talked about the etc. And yeah, etc. And anything else similar. So this is really, if you read that document on December 5th, it really covered like the whole gap. Like if they wanted to, they could just so today Bitcoin exchanges are operating, right? BTC China is running really well in China. We're still the number one in terms of user visits, unique users, and all the user base and all that stuff. But if they want to shut us down, they actually could, because they would use some of the clauses to say, oh, sorry, we didn't clarify. We actually meant exchanges are not allowed either. So it is what it is. It is what it is. That's why I've learned sort of by experience that when you make investments in China, there's a China risk. I kept hearing about it, but I didn't really understand it until this happened. So this is the China risk. Okay. So hope that was an interesting lesson for you guys. Some common misunderstandings of the regulatory situation in China. So it turns out Bitcoin is not banned in China. There's been a lot of intentional or unintentional press that reported that China has banned Bitcoin. This is especially prevalent in the English media. That was bad translations of the Chinese news. So it's only for banks and financial institutions that due to the business charter, the business method, dealing with currencies, they're not allowed to deal with Bitcoins, okay? It's like chicken eggs are not currencies, right? That's why banks, they don't sell eggs, they don't take deposits in eggs, they don't do anything with meat or vegetables, right? Same kind of thing. So Bitcoin exchanges remain a legal business so far. Yes. Okay, so payment processors, so people ask me, can I get a bank account in China, my business? It turns out the answer is yes. Because the banks were not called into that meeting. So it's funny, all the banks know about the meeting that the payment processors were called into, but the bank never got called into the meeting, so they just pretend nothing happened. In fact, those 12 payment companies that got called in? There are about 98 other payment companies that didn't get called in. So for a while, the 12 couldn't do Bitcoin, but the 98 could. So it's really weird. So payment processors were warned and not to do business with Bitcoin exchanges. So basically, payment processors now cannot directly work with a Bitcoin exchange. It turns out they could indirectly. I'll tell you this because I have nothing to hide, nothing to be afraid of anymore. Actually, I won't tell you. Let me see how to say this. Pretend there's a country that sees like Bitcoin companies there, Bitcoin exchanges, and what they did was this hypothetical Bitcoin company. What they did was the payment company was not allowed to process withdrawals and deposits for exchanges, right? And that was a verbal thing. There was no written rule about that, right? So what they did was, the CEO got really creative, and let me just show you this. It says, actually, it's frustrating. So what they did was, they said, let me set up another company, a sister company, that's not related to the Bitcoin exchange, and have the sister company sign a business relationship with the payment company. So the sister company can take deposits and withdrawals, and then the sister company will hold all the assets for the customers, right? So apparently that works. So if you go to China now and you want to use a Bitcoin exchange, you could just, you'll be depositing money and getting withdrawals through a payment processor to a sister company of the Bitcoin exchange. And that is the prevalent method right now. So it is what it is. But I won't tell you what are the names of those sister companies because they might get in trouble. Anyways, so we're also using banks to process customer deposits, bank-to-bank wire transfers, and that's fine because banks were never told not to do it. But in theory, if they wanted to, because of what I use the term the directly, indirectly, right? In theory, banks could get looped in too if the government wanted to sort of slow that down. So it's a little bit, we'll have to see how things go in the next few months and years, okay? So for those of you who are curious, regulation in Hong Kong and Taiwan, in Hong Kong it's actually not very different. Media coverage wrongly assumed that China wanted to use Hong Kong as an experiment for Bitcoin regulation. It's actually, I highly doubt it's not the case. HKMA, which is the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, sort of like the Federal Reserve, they say they will not regulate Bitcoin, but to be honest, it's a little insincere because when they don't regulate it, that means banks are afraid to touch it, so it's just as bad. So banks in Hong Kong actually want nothing to do with Bitcoin, despite the perceived openness from the regulator. And the reason is actually, I blame the US here. It's right there. The reason is that the US actually has very strict banking laws that they apply to the whole world. You guys know about this? FATCA, is it FATCA or FATCA? Yeah. BSA, which is Bank Secrecy Act, that's like the big elephant. KYC, AML, all these things. So the whole world is essentially subservient to the U.S. banking regulators. And when the U.S. says jump, the rest of the world go like ha. They just kowtow to the U.S. banking authorities. So it actually makes that's why it's so difficult to do business in Bitcoin around the world, is because of the BSA stuff. So I'm not saying BSA is good or bad. It's very strict. Okay, good. So let's wrap this up quickly. So the future of Bitcoin, there's a chilling effect. Essentially, what happened in December is that people are sitting out. Bitcoin consumers in China, buyers and traders, have been mentally shaken by the recent regulation in China. They got scared because they know now that at any moment in time, Chinese government can come down and squash things. And then because of that, the state-controlled media has actually taken a reverse position. So up until December, the state media was like, "Oh yes, Bitcoin is very interesting. Let's cover this." So a lot of interviews, a lot of shows, a lot of press coverage. I got called onto a lot of TV shows and stuff like that talking about Bitcoin. And since then, now it's total reversed. All the media is now, "Oh, let's talk about how Bitcoin is bad, how Bitcoin is dangerous, how Bitcoin is volatile." So that's been the general trend. So it'll take a few months for the dust to settle and for the consumers to regain confidence. So I think if you take anywhere from a few months to upwards of a year. So 2014 will be an interesting year. In the meantime, prices have settled. There's less volatility. I think it dropped a little bit last week, also due to some rumors. There was a rumor last Thursday. Today's Monday, right? Yeah, I'm still jet lagged. There's a rumor last Thursday that the central bank will shut off all Bitcoin exchanges on April 15th. So I was like, oh, interesting. So I wasn't phased because you never know if it's true or not. And it turned out to be false. So price have recovered a little bit. Volume and activity is down, upwards of 80-90%. So BTC China, despite what you read in the press, BTC China is still ranked #1 in terms of usage, unique users, and visitors. The reason there's some debate is that we report true trading volumes, whereas the competitors have taken to a habit of creating fake volumes and reporting fake volumes. So they just keep going at it, just higher and higher fake volumes. So the true activity level is down 80-90%. Prices are more stable. We're back to about trading levels in September, before the whole run-up in October. However, as a company, we're continuing forward. We've been funded, well funded, so we're going to continue to develop more products and services for Bitcoin in China. And of course, there will be more and more Bitcoin startups in this ecosystem in China and Asia. Okay, so the future is still bright, I think, in China, but it may take a few months for things to recover. Store of value will remain an important driver. This is the savings aspect. Speculative trading may have topped out, depending on how scared people are. And Bitcoin as a payment will be re-examined. Okay, so that's to be tested again. Okay, thank you. So we'll take some questions. Do we have some questions? Okay, so I see this gentleman there.
You mentioned that Bitcoin is a virtual commodity in China. Can you please elaborate on the history of virtual commodities, say, in past 10, 15 years in China?
Wow. Good question. You really want me to answer that?
Yeah, really.
Okay, well, so I've only been in China for 7 years. I can tell you during my time, QQ coin came out. It's a virtual currency. It was what I call the first generation. It's a centralized currency issued by Tencent. It came out and it was, people were buying things with it in real life. And then the government came out and issued some guidance around that. So they basically locked that up. And they were able to do that because QQ coin was issued by a company called Tencent, one of the largest internet companies in China. So that was effective because they could actually control it and force Tencent to stop or play or not play. So, however, given Bitcoin is decentralized, like our company, if the government says BTC China cannot operate, I'm like, okay, I give up, I go to Hong Kong, but they can't stop Bitcoin ultimately. So that's why they realized rather than telling people to stop, it's better to regulate it. So by the way, I'm pro-regulation of Bitcoin exchanges in China, and worldwide for that matter, for consumer protection, to make sure things are done right, to make sure everything's legit and all that. So it's really that short history. It's just QQ coin up until.
What about a lot of virtual items? Like, QQ coin was used to pay in games, and there's 50 billion industry of virtual items, and Bitcoin was regulated as one of these game items. So Tencent got a lot of history.
Bitcoin was not regulated then. QQ coin was.
No, but Bitcoin was put in the same class of assets as KuCoin before, and all in-game items. Like here we got World of Warcraft in China, you got some other games, and in Korea you got some other games as well. So what about the history of that stuff and how that affected Bitcoin regulation?
To be honest, I don't have much more to say beyond what I said. I don't know. you're right that Bitcoin has been classified as virtual commodity, virtual object. It's not clear to me how much of the past rules about virtual currency will apply to Bitcoin, because not all that is relevant. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you offline more. After that. Okay, thank you. So question in the back first.
If the China's come out and instead say that it was a currency, would the Bank of China be forced to implement technology to accept it as a depository?
So first of all, if China actually come out and said Bitcoin was a currency, that would be good news for everyone. But Bank of China would not be forced. But at least if that were the case, I mean, in that hypothetical world, then Bank of China would be allowed to create account deposits for Bitcoin for people. And if that happened, they would compete with my business, but I'd be very happy. Then that means Bitcoin has gone mainstream, right? Yeah. So question there? 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Yes, I was wondering, so in the US, the regulatory goals of the government tend to be more around preventing money laundering as well as ensuring protection of consumer deposits. I'm wondering if you have insight into what are the goals that are driving, what the Chinese government is doing with Bitcoin? What do you think they're trying to achieve?
For the regulation, you mean?
Yeah.
I alluded to that earlier. I think of 2014 activities, if you will. So a lot of times, and you'll find this with China and other countries, they'll most likely, well, a lot of countries end up deferring to the United States because they cede leadership to the U.S. for to take a sort of a position on how to regulate Bitcoin. So once the U.S. starts regulating Bitcoin correctly, a lot of countries will follow. So what China did in December was sort of a stopgap measure to sort of, put a mark in the sand, essentially slow it down. And what I mean by it is slow the price increase down, because they don't want to see a bubble. They don't want to see a bubble go up really high, and then for a lot of Chinese consumers to be tied into that, and for a crash there to hurt a lot of Chinese consumers. Right. So that's probably the reason. Yeah. Okay. Question?
So, you kind of mentioned that in China, transaction volume is down 80 to 90%. What do you see as a need for the industry, for regulation, for media, for this to sort of turn around in China?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a straightforward answer. So there's two aspects to it. Do I want us to go back to this frothy era of this bubble? Probably not. It's not healthy for the long-term market. So like I said, there's been a chilling factor right now, and I think it just takes some time for people to get comfortable again. And once prices stabilize, people get comfortable again, and then they can come back in. It takes media, it takes technology, it takes things like this Mongoose thing certainly doesn't help. But because of the Mongoose thing, I think our industry will grow up and become more mature and start either self-regulating or implement more practices in place that will reassure customers that exchanges that do things well are more sound than exchanges that don't do things well. So it'll take some time and a lot of hard work. Yeah. Question over there? This one first. Yeah.
In your chart about what Bitcoin is used for, only 5% of it was for payment.
That's right.
So do you see that changing in the future, or do you think it will just use this sort of value?
It turns out in China, the payment aspect is not as compelling, and the reason is the online payment infrastructure in China is actually very, very well developed. In the US, it's only PayPal, right? You guys only use PayPal online? In China, there's several choices, and all of the choices I would say are better than PayPal here in the US. Very, very fluid, very, very low cost, low fees. So it's actually harder for something like Bitcoin to compete with existing so-called payment processors in China. Yeah. We have a question there, and then we'll go back.
So in that chart, you didn't ask about evading capital controls. So I heard it's a $50,000 limit.
That's right. I'll tell you about that. I forgot to put it on my slide. That's actually one of the most. So his point was, in China there's capital controls. So regardless of whether you're a visitor or resident or citizen, you can only move money into and out of China at most $50,000 a person per year. So it's interesting how they quote that in dollars. Yeah. So the limit is actually $50,000 equivalent, not whatever the RMB is. Even though that limit is in place, in practice, most people never hit the limit, for the people who actually go over the limit, in practice, there are many, many easy ways to do that. They have these money exchangers. These are people whose full-time job it is. They stand outside a bank. They provide money exchanging services to people. And that business is sort of illegal by nature, but it's not enforced. So you know, these guys, the funny thing is, they stand right next to the security guard of the bank, and all the bank tellers know this guy. They know all the bank tellers, so they go in and out every day. They move a lot of money in and out. It's just this. It's part of that. It's part of the shadow banking sector in China. So therefore, the summary is that for the Bitcoin is practically never used to evade capital controls because there are much easier ways to do that. Okay, question?
Frank Al, do you see Bitcoin when you see Bitcoin as a storage for money when currencies in real life crash?
Oh, I'm very bullish on that. I think Bitcoin is a great asset to put your savings in to preserve purchasing power. Yeah. You guys agree with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And this applies worldwide. It's not just China. It's America, anywhere. I mean, it started with what was that place last year? Cyprus. Cyprus. Yes, Cyprus. Okay. Yes, Alex.
On the payment side, do you have any candidates in mind in terms of testing the waters? You know, it's not a currency, so you said it's more like a commodity barter, or is that just not even?
It's right now. There's a chilling effect, so everybody stepped away from that because they don't want to get caught by. It's too sensitive right now. So a lot of companies for example, a lot of companies who are proposing taking Bitcoin as payment, they all like step back, including Baidu, you know, Honda, and all that.
But the guy on the street.
Well, then it's hard to measure that. So there might be some of that. Okay.
So, is China basically bullish on the idea of Bitcoin because Bitcoin's going to work in every other country except for China for payment?
Are you talking about Chinese government or the Chinese people?
Chinese people. So they're not thinking, oh, this is an amazing solution to our money online needs. It's more like, oh, the rest of the world's going to use this, so let's put our money in.
So, so let me tell you something about the Chinese people. They love to gamble. Do you guys know that? They love to gamble, and that's why you see speculation being such a big part. They love to gamble, and what you said is right. So the smart ones realize, oh my gosh, the rest of the world is going to embrace Bitcoin, and when the rest of the world embraces Bitcoin, what happens? The Bitcoin price will go up. And you know what? I'm going to buy some Bitcoin today. When it goes up, I'm going to flip it. So that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They are predicting that the rest of the world will embrace Bitcoin, and they're trying to get ahead of the game and buying Bitcoin to speculate.
How can it be a nation of savers and a nation of gamblers?
I'll tell you. Why do you think they're saving the money? Total the cap. They gamble. Okay, last question. The lady here. Does the Chinese government own Bitcoin? That's a great question. I don't think they do, but that's a great question. I would actually be very happy to hear if governments start confessing that they're starting to buy Bitcoin. That would be really awesome, wouldn't it? But I don't think the government has owned Bitcoin. That was a joke. I'm not here to talk about Russia. I don't know. But the Russians, they like Bitcoin too. They for some reason the Russians really like BTC China. I don't know why. Could be because they're really scared of BTCE. So they like the Russian TV station. They always call me up. They want to interview me. I'm like some minor celebrity there. I don't know why. It's like,
So we have some time for some mingling afterwards.
okay.
Let's
Yeah. Okay, good. So, okay.